Hey, welcome back to another walkthrough. This is our second Chapter 4 Excel walkthrough, Aquatics. Let's begin. We'll go ahead and scroll down to our Week 6, Chapter 4. Go ahead and click on My Lab IT Course Content. And let's click on Excel Chapter 4. And this time we are going to work on the Excel 4G Aquatics homework. We'll download our materials. And remember, do not download all files. We're going to go ahead and download each file individually. Now, once again, just like we did with the last assignment, for Mac users, you will be using a different set of instructions or different instructions throughout the worksheet. For my Windows users, notice that this right here says keep or discard. Let's go ahead and keep it. This is our database. My Mac users, you won't be using a database. You will be using the CSV file that is attached to the instructions or downloading starting materials. All right, let's go ahead and open up our student file. And make sure you hit enable editing. And let's begin. So we've already done step 1. Now for step number 2, it wants us to click on cell A2. So I'm going to go ahead and click on cell A2. After we click on cell A2, it wants us to insert a recommended pivot table by choosing the blank pivot table option. So anytime we want to insert something, we will go to the Insert tab here, click on Recommended Pivot Tables. And from Recommended Pivot Tables, we are going to click on Blank Pivot Table. So now we are going to build our pivot table. It wants us to add the month field to the filters area. So let's go ahead and drag the month field to the filters area. It wants us to add the pull field to the rows. So I'm going to click and drag it to rows. And it wants us to take the item field and move it to the columns area. So I'm going to click and drag item to columns. And it wants me to put the amount field in the values area. And notice how it now built our pivot table out of those different options. It actually took all of this information right here, which has no rhyme or reason, is not really sorted properly, and made it into a more usable chart, more usable table. So now on step number 3, it wants us to format the values in the pivot table. So let's go ahead and highlight our values. Let's click and drag all the way down, highlight our values. And we will go to our Home tab here. Under our Home tab, under the number grouping, we're going to click on this little guy right here, which is our number format dialog box. We're going to click on number. It wants us to do 0 decimal places, so we'll put a 0 in the decimal places. And it wants us to use the 1000 separator. Once we've selected those options, go ahead and hit OK. For number 4, it wants us to insert slicers. Now what slicers do is it allows us to drill deeper into this information using easy to use buttons. So to insert these slicers, let's go ahead and click to deselect our values. Make sure you are selected, or make sure you are clicked inside of this pivot table. We're going to come up here to the Pivot Table Analyze, and we are going to click on Insert Slicer. And we want to put a check mark next to Pull and Item. So check mark Pull and Item and hit OK. So now we have our 2 slicers. So it wants us to, I'm going to go ahead and move these over a little bit so they're not on top of each other. It wants us to filter by Tropic Pool and Spa Fees. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Tropics Pool, and I'm going to click on Spa Fees. And notice now it will filter it down to only include Tropics pools and what their spa fees are. It wants us to move the slicer so that the upper left corner is in the left corner of E3. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to get the move handle. Notice the 4 arrows pointing away from each other. I'm going to click, hold, and drag it. And bring it so my cursor is, or this pool slicer is inside E3, just like that. It also wants me to move the other slicer, the item slicer, to G3, right next to it. So I'm going to move it right there, make it right next to it. Boom. Now it wants me to make a copy of this worksheet and name it Tropics Pool. So I'm going to come down here to where it says Sheet 1, or whatever sheet this is that we have our slicers and this smaller pivot table. I'm going to right click on Sheet 1. I'm going to hit Move or Copy. I'm going to create a copy and hit OK. And now you should see Sheet 1 with a parentheses of 2. We want to rename this, so let's go ahead and right click on it and hit Rename. And let's rename it Tropics Pool. Make sure it's Tropics Pool. Make sure you capitalize the T, make sure you capitalize the P. Once you've typed it in, hit Enter. Now let's go ahead and click back on Sheet 1. It wants us to clear the filters from the slicers and then remove the slicers. So let's go ahead and click on the Clear Filters button right here. And let's go ahead and hit the Clear Buttons filter here. And now let's go ahead and delete these slicers by clicking on one of them, hit the delete key, and click on the other slicer and hit the delete key. Both of them are gone. And we want to rename this sheet, so let's go ahead and right click on Sheet 1, hit Rename, and we're going to rename this 2Q Revenue. Make sure you capitalize the R for revenue, and hit Enter. So moving right along, we are on step number 6. It wants us to insert a pivot chart. So make sure you are clicked on this particular pivot table on 2Q Revenue. We're going to go to the Insert tab. From the Insert tab, we're going to come over here to our charts. We're going to click on Pivot Charts and Pivot Chart. It wants us to insert a stacked column chart. So let's go ahead. Right here we have a clustered column chart. Second one over is a stacked column chart. Let's go ahead and click on that. And let's go ahead and hit OK. It wants us to move this chart to a new worksheet. So we're going to come up here to our Design tab, our Pivot Chart Design tab, hit Move Chart. We're going to put a dot next to New Sheet, and we're going to name this 2Q Revenue Chart. Make sure you spell it correctly, capital R, capital C, and hit OK. So now that we have our chart on a new table, or on a new sheet, it wants us to apply the Layout 3 chart layout. So I'm going to come up here to my Design tab. From my Design tab where it says Quick Layout under Chart Layouts, I'm going to select Layout 3 right here. So to add our data labels, let's go ahead and hit the plus sign here and put a check mark next to data labels. It also wants us to hide all of the field buttons on the chart. Let's go ahead and right click on one of these buttons here, the month button. Let's go ahead and right click on that. And hide all field buttons on chart. And that will get rid of all of our field options. We want to give our chart a title, so let's go ahead and click on the chart title. And click on it again to put our cursor inside there. Let's delete that. And let's type in second quarter Aquatics program revenue. Once we typed in second quarter Aquatics program revenue, let's go ahead and deselect our chart title. It wants us to insert a custom footer, so I'm going to come to my page layout tab. I'm going to click on my page layout or our page setup dialog box button right here. Under header footer, I'm going to choose a custom footer, and I'm going to put the file name, which is this button, in the left section, and hit OK. And hit OK. So there we are. We have our pivot chart based off of our pivot table into Q revenue. So now on step number 8, it wants us to add a new worksheet to the workbook. To do that, we're going to come down here where it has the plus button next to Aquatics revenue right here and click on it once. Notice it will add a new sheet for us. Here we want to import data from another source. In this particular case, for Windows users, we are going to import it from our Access database. For Mac users, you are going to import it from that CSV file that we downloaded. So for my Windows users, let's go to the Data tab here. And let's click on Get Data. And let's click From Database. And from Microsoft Access Database. It should be under our Downloads folder. Let's go ahead and click on our Downloads folder. And here it is, our pool supplies. Make sure you select on pool supplies and hit Import. It wants us to load both tables, so let's put a check mark next to select multiple items, put a check mark next to each one of these tables. Click the down arrow and hit load. And what that will do is it will load our data into Excel. Once again, for Mac users, follow step 8 on how to import the information from the CSV file. So now for step number 9, it wants us to insert a pivot table using the existing worksheet and verify to use this workbook's data model. So to do that, let's go to our Insert tab. Let's click on Pivot Table. Make sure we have Use this workbook's data model. We're going to use this existing sheet and go ahead and hit OK. Now we can start building our pivot table. Let's hit the down arrow for supplies. Let's go ahead and hit the down arrow from Order Summary. It wants us to place the supplier field from the suppliers table into the columns. So right here, supplier, let's go ahead and bring it down to the columns. It wants us to take item. Let's find where it says item. We're going to bring item down to our rows. In the quantity field, it wants us to bring that down to values. And now we have our table built. We want to highlight where all of the values would be, and we want to modify this to change it to a numbers format. So let's click on the Home tab. Under our numbers grouping on this little guy right here, which is our Format Cells dialog box, let's click on Number. We want to have 0 decimal places, and we want to use the 1000 separator and hit OK. So now for step number 11, it wants us to insert a row above the pivot table. So let's go ahead and hover over the 1 over here. If you see the row 1, hover over it. Notice how you get a black arrow pointing to the right. Go ahead and click on that. Go ahead and right click on it and hit Insert. And it will insert a blank row above our table. Now we want to click on our brand new cell A1 and we want to type in Aquatics program purchases. Make sure you spell everything correctly, capitalize the A, the P, and the P. Go ahead and hit enter. Now it wants us to apply a title cell style to that cell. So let's go ahead and click back onto cell A1. Let's come to our home group or our home tab. Under our styles group, click the down arrow with a line above it and select the title format. We also want to rename this sheet to Aquatics Purchases. Let's go down to sheet 3. Let's right click on it, hit rename, and we're going to type in Aquatics purchases, and hit enter. So now for step number 12, we want to insert a pivot. Click on the pivot table. So we're going to click on the pivot table. We're going to insert a 3D pie chart, pivot pie chart. So let's go to the insert tab under our charts. Let's click on pivot chart and click on pivot chart again. This time we are going to do a pie chart. It's going to be a 3D pie chart. So let's go ahead and click on 3D pie. And we want to hit the OK button, and it will put in our 3D pie chart. We want to move it to a new sheet, so let's go ahead and click on our design tab right here. Click Move Chart, dot next to New Sheet, and let's go ahead and give this new sheet Aquatic Supplies Chart, and hit OK. And it will move that to a brand new sheet for us. We should already still have our pivot chart fields here to the side. If not, you can come up here to the pivot chart analyze and click on the fields list button here. And we want to modify this a little bit. So we want to take the supplier field and move it to our axis category. And we want to remove item. So let's go ahead and click on item and hit remove field. For step number 14, it wants us to remove the legend from the chart. So I'm going to come up here to our plus sign, chart elements, and uncheck legend. I also want to put a check mark next to data labels. Click on the arrow pointing to the right of that and hit more options. I want to make sure my category name is checked, uncheck values, check mark percentage, and uncheck show leader lines. So the only two things that should be selected here are category name and percentage. And we also want to make sure that they are centered. So we're going to click on the center button right here. We also want to change the size to font 11. So let's go ahead and click on the home tab. Make sure that each one of these has a dot around them so they're all selected. If you haven't clicked off of anything, you should be fine. And then go ahead and change the font size to 11. So now for step number 15, we need to change the chart title. So let's go ahead and click on total and click on it again to put our cursor inside there. Let's delete the total and let's go ahead and change it to Aquatic Supply Purchases. Oh, make sure you capitalize that P. We want to change the font size of this. So let's go ahead and click on the outer border. Just click on one of these dots right here on the outer border to select the entire title. And we're going to change it to 24, size 24. And it'll make it a little bit bigger for us. It also wants us to hide all the field buttons. So let's go ahead and right click on the field button here, sum of quantity, and hit hide all field buttons on chart. It'll get rid of it for us. Go ahead and select somewhere in the blank area right here at the top to deselect everything. And we're going to put in a footer. So let's go ahead and go to our page layout tab. Let's click on this dot right here, our page setup dialog box. We'll click on header footer, custom footer, and in the left section, we're going to put the file name and hit OK and hit OK. So now we want to hide the Aquatics revenue sheet. So let's go ahead and come down here, find our Aquatics revenue sheet, which is this one right here. Let's go ahead and click on Aquatics revenue sheet. Let's right click on it and hit hide. And it will disappear so it's no longer there. It's still there. We just have to right click here or right click on one of these and show all. But we want to hide that particular one. Now it wants us to select all sheets, excluding the chart sheets, and insert a footer. So we want to select Tropic Pools. Let's click on Tropic Pools. Hold down your Control key. And after you hold down your Control key, select Aquatic Purchases and 2Q Revenue. Do not select the two charts right here. So now when you select all three of these, holding the Control button, it now allows us to do the same thing to all three of them at the exact same time. In this particular case, we want to add a footer. So we're going to come up here to our page layout tab, click on our page setup little dialog box button here, header footer, custom footer, and in the left section, we want to put in the file name. Go ahead and hit OK once. We also want to center these on the worksheet horizontally on the page, so click on margins, put a check mark next to horizontally on page. We also want to change the orientation, so from page, let's change the orientation to landscape. And lastly, we want to change it to fit on one page, so let's go ahead and click on fit to 1 by 1 and hit OK. And now we have just formatted all three of those worksheets at the same time. So now we want to just deselect all of them, so go ahead and right click on one of the ones that are selected and hit ungroup sheets. And now all of them are unchecked. All right, let's go ahead and put our properties into our files. Let's go ahead and hit the file button here. Click on info, show all properties. We're going to add a tag. We're going to do aquatic, all lowercase, revenue, comma, 1 space, supplies. Make sure everything is lowercase. Under subject, type in CGS. And make sure you have your author. So right here, author, it says Go Series. I'm going to right click on Go Series. I'm going to remove person. And then I'm going to add my name as the author. And there it is. And we're done. We're going to go ahead and save the file. I'm going to save it again for good measure. I'm going to minimize it. Come back to our downloading starting materials. Exit out of this. Upload our file. Should be under our downloads. Here it is, my Student Excel Aquatics 4G. I'm going to hit open, upload, and once it says success, submit for grading. And I'm going to close out the assignment. I'm going to come back to my course content. I'm going to hit the 3 dots and hit view submissions. And it looks like I earned a 97%. I'm happy with a 97%, but I'm curious to see what I got wrong. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And it looks like, actually, the same mistake I made on our last walkthrough. I did not apply the style 3 style to our chart. But I'm happy with a 97. You're more than welcome to go back and fix that and resubmit it for a better grade. But from here, I'm just going to leave it as is. Once again, thank you for watching this walkthrough. I will be working on next week's walkthrough shortly, and have a wonderful day.